Welcome to an edition of CCSD Living Environment. Today we're going to look at fertilization and development in organisms. Fertilization is when a haploid or monoploid sperm that has the N number of chromosomes and a haploid or monoploid egg that has the N number of chromosomes unite. And remember, unite means that they're coming together. And the other word that you'll see for coming together is to fuse. So when the egg and the sperm fuse together, they call that process fertilization. At the time of fertilization, when the egg and the sperm come together, the normal number of chromosomes for the species, or the 2N number, has been restored. So at the point in time where that egg and sperm come together, you're putting us back to the number of chromosomes that we are supposed to have. So the zygote, remember, is a fertilized egg cell. So what are we saying? We're saying that if we take a sperm, which is haploid or has the N number, and we take an egg, also known as the ovum, that has the haploid number or N number, and we put them together, N plus N gives me 2N in the zygote. So fertilization is the process of putting them together, and that gives me back this chromosome number for the species number, the chromosome number, the diploid number, the 2N number. And remember, for humans, that's 46. So what are my options for fertilization? Well, the first option we're going to look at is internal fertilization, which occurs inside the body of the female. Fewer eggs are produced by the female for that, and the developing offspring is well protected. Well, what are examples of internal fertilization? Humans and other mammals and birds also undergo internal fertilization. So the sperm are deposited inside the body of the female, and because of that, there are very few eggs produced by that female. From maybe 1 to 10 or so, not many more than that. The number of eggs produced is few, and that's because there is a lot of protection, mainly by the mother, in some cases by dad also. So what's the other option? External fertilization occurs outside the body of the female in water, because remember, the sperm need to be able to swim, and many eggs are produced in this case. The developing offspring has no protection. So who are we talking about with external fertilization? This would be like fish and frogs. So what happens? The female goes through the water and deposits the eggs, and then the male will go by the eggs and deposit the sperm into the water. The sperm can then swim because they're in water, and they will go and fertilize those eggs. How many eggs does that female lay? Usually there's hundreds of thousands of eggs with a fish or a frog, and that's because there's no protection from the mother. Those eggs, once they're fertilized, they're on their own. So the more eggs you have, the greater the chances of survival to avoid predation or drying out or whatever else might happen to decrease the chances of survival for those externally fertilized eggs. After the eggs are fertilized, the zygote needs to develop. This development occurs under different circumstances in different species. We know that for mammals, in our case, a placental mammal, it takes place inside the mother in the uterus. With marsupials, it starts off inside and then it finishes up inside the pouch. And we also know that with birds, it's happening inside of an egg. And with fish and frogs, it's occurring in the water. So for each organism, they're all undergoing development a little bit differently. The care and protection given to the developing embryo varies widely. So it just depends on which one they're falling into as to whether they're getting a lot of protection and care from the parent or if there's very little. And so what is development? Development is when a single fertilized cell eventually gives rise to a full-grown organism after a series of complex events. There's a lot of things that need to take place before that cell actually becomes the organism. And that process that they're undergoing is what we refer to as development. And just like with fertilization, there's a couple options for development, but the first thing we need to define is an embryo. We know that the zygote is the fertilized egg cell. Well, what is the embryo? An embryo is an organism in the early stages of development. So once fertilization has taken place and you have the zygote undergoes those changes to start becoming the organism, which is development. So the embryo is the zygote once it started that development process. So the embryo is in the early stages of development. We're past the fertilization point. We've started down the road to becoming the organism. So again, we have two options. External development, the embryos develop outside the parent's body. There's no additional nutrients provided by the mother, and there's no protection from the mother. Again, this would be like your fish and your frogs. So the eggs are in the water, they've been fertilized, the development is on their own. Not a lot of protection, so again, remember, lots and lots of eggs. And what's the other option? Internal development. Embryos develop inside the parent's body, nutrients are obtained from the mother's body during development, and protection is provided by the mother. Generally speaking, here we're saying parent's body. Remember, in seahorses, it's the male that actually delivers the babies. So it's kind of, that's the one case where that happens. But for the most part, internal development would be like a human or any type of mammal, where it's actually happening inside the mother's body. Okay, so mom is actually providing nutrients and also protection for that developing embryo. So let's talk about birds for a minute. Are we going to categorize birds as external development or internal development? Remember, they had internal fertilization, but what about development? Yeah, it should be external development, because what happens? The egg gets fertilized, and then that shell is put around the egg, and the female lays the egg. Even the same is true with a reptile. So the sperm and egg come together inside the female's body, and then she lays that egg outside. So it's external development. So how much nutrients are being provided by the mother once that embryo, that developing organism, is inside the egg? Yeah, not much. But what about the protection piece? Well, there is some, especially with birds. Birds will sit on their eggs to keep them warm, and they kind of keep an eye on them. So there is some with birds, but for reptiles, think about turtles. They dig a hole, they bury their eggs, and then mom and dad turtle go away. Really, the mom turtle goes away. The dad's already gone. So for those situations, it's external development. Reptiles, no protection. In birds, there is a little bit of protection for those eggs. That gives us the difference between external development and internal fertilization versus external fertilization. That takes us through talking about fertilization and development. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.